now, for your entertainment pleasure, an audio murder mystery starring a full cast of suspects. The Death of Dr. Davidson. We return to our mystery as Oliver Forrester joins Inspector McTavish in the dining room. Oliver has asked to be interviewed privately with Inspector McTavish alone. Intrigued, McTavish has agreed and asked Sergeant Roy to remain with the rest of the guests in the drawing room.
Mr. Forrester, do sit down. I won't take up too much of your time.
I'm happy to cooperate with the police. Did I say something funny?
No, excuse me. It's just that Mr. Smythe said almost the exact same thing when I questioned him.
Well, in my case, you can believe it. In his case, well, I'm sure you know by now what an artful criminal that man is.
We are looking into his background, of course, but whatever his past, it does not mean that he murdered your father-in-law.
Inspector, may I be blunt?
I would welcome it.
You haven't got a hope of solving this case?
That is rather blunt, I must say. Go on.
Consider the facts. No one saw Dr. Davidson after about 10 p.m., and his body was discovered at around 8 a.m. the next morning. In the intervening 10 hours, there were 8 people in this house with motive, means, and opportunity, and no alibis. I dare say that would be almost impossible to make a murder charge stick, barring anything short of a full confession.
I see. And is this your legal opinion?
I practice corporate law, not criminal, but I know enough to know what a terrifically awful case this would be to bring to trial. I doubt any prosecuting attorney worth his salt would even touch it.
Fascinating.
Any good defense attorney, furthermore, would certainly present an alternate theory of the crime. Why, he'd have 7 other viable suspects to pin it on, any one of whom could have just as easily committed the crime as whoever stands accused.
Well then, tell me, what do you propose I do about this sad state of affairs?
Why not say you can't charge anyone? Do you have to arrest someone? Can't you just leave it unexplained?
There is the matter of justice for the victim, Mr. Forrester. As an officer of the law, I am duty-bound to bring criminals to justice.
I do understand the need for a satisfactory conclusion in a murder case, or at least something your superiors can give to the newspapers. Personally, I think you couldn't go far wrong with Herrero. Davidson had something on him and threatened him with it. Wouldn't it be easy to say he did it and then tried to escape? I don't think anyone would fault your logic in arresting him.
Just a tidy little arrest, then.
I say give your higher-ups the arrest they're looking for, and give the family the peace of mind of knowing that scoundrel Herrero has been dealt with.
Of course, there is the small matter of whether he actually did it.
If you can't prove anyone else did, does it matter?
If I had your scruples, Mr. Forrester, my job would be a far sight easier.
I don't care what you think of me, Inspector. I know this family, and I know they were browbeaten, bullied, and blackmailed by that man for decades. He was a vile, selfish brute who treated his whole family very badly. He was a devil for dramatic gestures. He should have been on the stage. He certainly craved the limelight enough to have been a performer.
It seems to me, if you'll forgive my bluntness, that if I were to put names in a hat to make an arrest for this murder, well, it might as easily be your name I drew. You've been most outspoken about your hatred of the victim, if you see what I mean.
I'll come clean, Inspector, because I don't care what happens to me. I'll tell you everything about my dealings with the Davidson family.
Please do.
Dr. Davidson was my client many years ago. I handled many of his personal affairs, and since I was familiar with the New York Stock Exchange through some of my other clients, he asked me to advise him about certain investments. I was eager to impress him because I had met his daughter and fallen in love with her. I wanted to marry her and thought if I could provide him with some inside information I had learned from my other clients.
He would consent to your marrying Sadie.
Not Sadie. Marlena.
Indeed.
So I broke the law. and violated attorney-client privilege. Davidson was able to sell his stocks before the crash and was able to buy certain others afterwards that rebounded so well he became astonishingly rich. He didn't seem to mind how he came into such wealth until one summer when Marlena and I had a bit of a bad break and she went off to Spain to think things over. I guess he thought she and I were through, and so he forgave me. This is difficult to admit, but you see, I had begun a friendship with Sadie, mostly because I couldn't bear the thought of never seeing Marlena again. I suppose she took it for courtship, because quite suddenly I found myself blackmailed into marrying her. She had always been a high-strung, needy sort of girl, and I can only assume Dr. Davidson wanted her married off and out of his hair. Why she chose me, I'll never know. But I had no choice, you see. I could either marry her or face disbarment and possibly prison.
So that's why Dr. Davidson told everyone he could have you disbarred.
But I didn't kill him. I swear it. It's all water under the bridge now. My career is winding down anyway, and as for the insider trading, under U.S. law, the statute of limitations on that has long run out. So you see, I simply had no motive to kill him.
Not for those reasons, perhaps.
What other motive could I have?
I'm not privy to the hearts of men, Mr. Forrester, but with an admission such as the one you just made concerning Mrs. Smythe...
All I've ever wanted for Marlena is her happiness and safety. That's all I'll ever want.
Forgive me, sir, if this is indelicate, but I rather think there's more to it than that. Mrs. Forrester told me you did not spend the night with her last night. Were you, perhaps, with Mrs. Smythe?
Absolutely not. I admit it. I did go to check on her after that awful dinner. I heard she and Herrero having a terrific row, mostly about money. I saw him storm out of the room in a rage, so I wanted to hang back in the shadows and make sure no harm came to her. But that's all. I had planned to stay all night in the hallway if I had to, in case he came back and caused trouble. Now, I know my instincts were right. That man can't be trusted. It must have been him.
There is the issue of you having a key to Dr. Davidson's room. Someone mentioned you locked the door, and I myself saw you unlock it to admit the sergeant and myself yesterday morning.
All right. I admit that, too. I took it off Hannah's key ring. After I checked on Marlena, I had intended to sneak into the study and see if I could find the evidence he had on Herrero. But I heard he and Mar coming down the hall, and so I left. I'm surprised they didn't wake the whole house with their arguing. Herrero was absolutely scarlet with rage. At any rate, I took to the sunroom to sleep, not wanting to be too far away from Mar's room in case things took a drastic turn.
So you never did enter Dr. Davidson's study?
I swear to you, no.
You recognized the smell of almonds you found in the cup by Dr. Davidson's body, and you identified it as cyanide. How did you know it was cyanide?
Doesn't everyone?
No. Not everyone is intimately familiar with the smell of deadly poisons, sir.
Well, I remember a case from law school. A woman poisoned her husband by crushing up the pits of bitter almonds and putting them in his morning oatmeal. The smell of almonds was overwhelming, but she thought disguising it with maple syrup would conceal her intent. It worked. He died instantly.
So you know quite a bit about the poison.
Did I mention she went to the gallows? I don't fancy myself a genius, but I'm not stupid enough to poison someone with something so blasted obvious. Inspector, are you all right? You've got a strange look in your eye.
It is obvious, isn't it? This manner of death. It's quite unmistakable that death has occurred by misadventure.
Yes? What of it?
I am beginning, I think, to understand. The killer wanted there to be no doubt this was not a natural death. In fact, great pains were taken to ensure that the scene, when discovered, pointed directly to a willful act.
Yes, but what of it? Whoever killed him probably acted in a fit of insanity. and didn't think to smother the old man or push him down the stairs or some such to make it look accidental. I can tell you, Inspector, I should have done something like that if I had killed him. I'd sooner cut the brakes on his Bentley and make it look like he lost control going down to the village than spike his drink with something as quick and painless as cyanide.
You also happen to know that cyanide is quick and painless.
Well, of course I don't know, but I do know it's rather quick. I should have liked to see that man suffer a bit longer if I had gone so far as to murder him. I don't mind admitting that to you.
I see. Well, thank you for your frankness, Mr. Forrester. It's quite refreshing, I must say. May I be so bold as to be frank with you in return?
Please do.
Thank you, sir. I admit I'm perplexed by certain aspects of this case. I don't often like to confess such a thing, but I feel I can be candid with you.
I appreciate your faith in me. What's troubling you about the case?
It is simply this. Everyone in this house had reason to kill him, but I'm left with the sense that there are only one or two of you who had adequate, shall we say, verve to commit the crime?
By verve, you mean the guts to do it, I suppose?
Precisely. Taking a life in such a manner, it is not so easy a thing to do as the novels would have you believe, especially when it's one's father, for instance, or one's husband.
You're absolutely right. And you've rather confirmed my theory about Herrero, that it was done by someone unrelated to Davidson.
But then there is the matter of the supposed damning evidence he had on you and Mr. Smythe in particular. We've searched his office and surgery and found no files of any kind. I placed a telephone call this morning to his solicitor, and the reputable gentleman assured me that he had not been charged with the safekeeping of any files or documents for Dr. Davidson. So if there is in fact damning evidence that would inspire murder, where is it?
I shouldn't think that would matter. But perhaps it was in the safe, and Herrero found it and destroyed it.
And out of an abundance of brotherly love, he also destroyed the evidence against you.
If he was in a hurry, perhaps he simply took everything from the safe and ran. He may not have even looked at what he was stealing.
Perhaps. But you see, without these documents, I'm afraid it would be, as you say, nearly impossible to prove that there was sufficient motive for a murderer to strike.
The killer need only have thought that the evidence existed, Inspector, and Davidson announced rather stridently that it did, in front of everyone. That would certainly hold up in court. We were all witnesses.
Precisely, Mr. Forrester. Well, thank you for your insight. It has been most illuminating.
Have you finished with your interviews?
I have only Miss Higginbotham left to interview, in fact.
You've left Hannah for last. But surely she's the prime suspect.
It looks that way, yes. That's why I chose to interview her after I had spoken to everyone else. Do be so kind as to show her in.
Is Oliver trying to cover up his own guilt by implicating Harrison Smythe? Or is he protecting someone else, someone he thinks may have committed the crime? And what will Hannah have to say to the inspector? Tune in next time to find out.